Hey everybody, welcome to the Pine Cottage. My name is Nicole and today we are going to be baking sourdough bagels. So if you are interested in a simple living video, you have come to the right place and I hope you'll join us. Sourdough recipes are usually a 2-day or a 3-day job. So the first day is always feeding the sourdough so that it's nice and active for the recipe. So unless your recipe is a discard recipe, you want to feed your starter. This starter has been in my refrigerator for about a week, so it's nice and active and bubbly. So I'm just going to pour it into a bowl that is on a kitchen scale. And it really doesn't matter how much I put in here because I'm just going to match the same amount of flour and the same amount of water to feed it. So for this recipe, I just kind of dropped whatever I could. I'm familiar with the recipe, so anything over 150 grams was fine with me. I'm doubling the recipe, so I think I'm closer to 250. So if I'm putting 250 of starter, I'm also going to put 250 of flour and 250 of water. When I say 250, I mean 250 grams. So I zeroed my scale after I put the starter in so that I could weigh the flour. And now I'm adding in my flour. And I'm being a little bit more precise with the flour because I know that I have to get as close to 250 as I can. I'm also feeding this starter about 5 to 6 hours before I'm prepping my dough. It needs about that long to be able to feed and to activate. So you want to time it right. I'm doing this around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Here I am adding my water. I use a Berkey water filter. So we are using filtered water, and here I am measuring the water. So yeah, I'm starting this around 2 or 3 in the afternoon so that it has time to activate and I can prep the dough before I go to bed then. So I'm just gonna mix all 3 of those ingredients together, and you want it to form like a pancake batter consistency. So this is what it should look like when it's all mixed together. So now it's right before bedtime. I'm doing this around 9:30 at night, and I'm going to mix everything together. So I buy my flour at Costco. I buy organic flour and I just buy it in bulk. So I refill my canisters, and I was hoping to empty that bag so I could throw it away, but I wasn't able to. Here's 8 cups of flour. I'm doubling this recipe. It calls for 4, so we're doing 8. We have a family of 4 who loves bagels, so we go through a lot during the week. Next, we're going to do our filtered water. We're going to do about 3 cups. We're going to do 4 tablespoons of sugar and 2 teaspoons of salt. I use pink Himalayan salt. This is what my active starter looks like. It's not super bubbly, but it's okay because I am going to let this sit overnight. Usually in the colder weather, it takes a little bit longer for it to get active than it does in the summer. So I'm doing 1 cup of starter, and I'm putting the rest in my mason jar to sleep in the refrigerator. So I just wanted to cut in here really quick to talk to you about how to store your starter in the refrigerator. I don't think I was very clear about that. You can store your starter without refeeding it. Let's say you go on vacation for a couple weeks, or you just are taking a break from making bread for several months. You can keep it in your refrigerator without feeding it. I've heard up to 6 months. I have not gone that long, but I have gone like 2 or 3 months without feeding it, without making bread. So if that's something that you need to do, you need to take a break, you can store it in your refrigerator. When you go to make bread again, you may have to reactivate it. Well, you will have to reactivate it, but you may have to do it more than once. So let's say you decide that you're going to make bread after not having made it for a couple months. You're gonna pull out a little bit of the starter. You're gonna feed it like we did in that very first step. So you're gonna do equal parts starter, flour, and water. You're gonna let it activate for like 5 to 6 hours. Then you're gonna refeed it again before you make your recipe. And then you're gonna let it feed or activate for another 5 to 6 hours. And then maybe you might feed it again. You want it to get really airy and bubbly and grow. So you may not see that growth in those bubbles the first time, or maybe even the second time. So you may have to refeed it up to like 3 times before you make a recipe again, depending on how long you let it sleep. Like I said, I've only gone like 2 months with letting it sleep, and I only had to refeed it 1 time. I didn't even have to refeed it a second time. I just did to see if it would bubble anymore, and 1 time would have been plenty. So I just wanted to clarify that when you let it sleep in the refrigerator, you're not feeding it, you're just letting it sleep. You only pull it out to feed it right before you need to make a recipe. If you're making a discard sourdough recipe, that means that you're just taking that sleeping starter that's in your refrigerator and putting it directly into a recipe. You're not refeeding it and reactivating it. It's just discard. It's the discard that's sleeping. I hope that's clear. I just wanted to pop in to tell you that real quick, and back to our bagels. So now we're going to mix all the ingredients together, and I'm going to just use this tool, this bread making tool. I don't know what it's called. It probably has an official name, but I don't know what it is. But it's really good at getting all of the ingredients incorporated together. It pulls everything from the side of the bowl, gets the sourdough mixed through, and here you can see I just have to get all the flour saturated, and I just think it's a really good tool. It doesn't take you all the way though. Eventually you're going to have to get your hands dirty. If you have a mixer, you probably could use one. I prefer not to use one when I'm making sourdough. I just like the process of making it all by hand. So I'm going to clean off this tool, and then I'm going to dig my hands in. It's very sticky, very shaggy at this point. It will stick to your hands and make a complete mess. But once you have everything saturated and incorporated, you're going to cover it with plastic wrap, and then it will sit overnight for 8 to 12 hours. Okay, so today is the big day, and I'm starting it off by reading a book. I'm reading You Learn by Living by Eleanor Roosevelt, and it is so good. I'm highlighting every page, I feel like. So I spent the morning doing some of that, and now it is around 9:30, and this is what my dough looks like. So it has risen to the top of the bowl, and when I take the plastic wrap off, you will be able to see that it's sticking to it a little bit, which is good. It has really grown overnight. And as I take it out of the bowl, you'll see that it doesn't really stick to the bowl. There are a lot of air pockets in there, which you want to see. It's really light and airy. So I just dusted the countertop with some flour, and I'm going to knead this dough for, the recipe recommends 10 minutes, but I never am able to do it. My arms get too tired. So I usually am able to knead it for at least 5 minutes. Sometimes, I think maybe once or twice I got all the way to 10 minutes, but usually it's like 5 or 6 minutes that I am kneading the dough. And every once in a while, you'll see that I reflour the countertop just so the bread doesn't stick. You'll also notice that the dough is no longer shaggy or sticky. It's nice and smooth. It's a great consistency. So now I'm going to put the dough back into the bowl and let it rest for 1 hour. Hi, so now we are going to shape and roll the bagels. I ended up letting the dough sit in the bowl for almost 2 hours. It's 11:16 right now. My brother ended up stopping over, and I just thought, well, I'll just let this go for 2 hours this time. So I'm going to link the recipe in the description box below so you're going to understand what I'm talking about. better. But basically, you can let it sit for 1 hour, like I set the timer for, and then once they're shaped into the bagels, you can let them rest for 1 to 2 hours. So I kind of just decide what works best for my day. If I'm in the middle of a project, I let this first go for 2 hours. And then once I shape them into bagels, I let them sit for 1 hour. I have in the past let them sit for 2 hours this first time, and then once they're in bagel form, let them sit another 2 hours, just because I get wrapped up in stuff around the house. So it doesn't really matter. It's not going to make or break your bagels. Just let them rest. Once I have my cookie sheets, I put a little parchment paper on each one, and I'm gonna put a dusting of flour, another one, on the counter, and we are going to cut the dough into sections. So the recipe calls for 8 equal sections, but we are doubling the recipe, so we are going to do 16 sections. This little guy is your best friend for bread making. So now it's time to shape the dough and cut it into sections. Comes out of the bowl nice and easy. And I'm not going to really knead it too much. I'm just going to shape it. So this little tool just slides underneath as I turn it with my other hand and just kind of smooths out the bottom and makes it into a nice sphere. I try to get it as round as possible so that I can cut them into as equal parts as I possibly can. I probably could weigh each one so that they were all uniform, but I don't. It's just for us. So some bagels are bigger than others, and that's okay with us. So after I have it into a nice sphere, I'm gonna cut the first section. I'm just gonna cut this right in half. So again, we wanna make 16 bagels. So I'm just gonna start by cutting this in half, and then I'm gonna shape each one of these halves. So every time I cut, I'm gonna shape again. And this just helps me to keep the bagels as even as possible, even though some do come out a little bit bigger. Okay, so now that I have 2 sort of equal parts, I'm gonna cut them in half again. So I'm gonna cut them in half. They make these little crescent shapes. I'm gonna shape them, and I'm gonna do the whole process over and over again until I have 16 small little round bagel loaves. So now we are going into our last cut, and then we will make the holes. Once I have all 16 cut, I do like to take each corner of the bottom of the bagel and fold them over and kind of pinch them in the center. I feel like this really closes them on the bottom and keeps them a little bit tidier. So the special tool that I use to make the holes in my bagels is an apple core, and it works great. I just use this end and I just put a hole right in the middle, and it does the trick.
best in me, the side of you can't see. And I don't need any other help than you standing by my
Once
side.
all the holes are poked, I put them on the baking sheets and we're going to cover them for 1 to 2 hours, depending on what your day looks like and what your first resting time was. Towards the end of their resting time, you're going to boil a pot of water, and we're going to be boiling each bagel 4 minutes on each side. So I have 16 bagels, and I can fit 4 bagels in this pot at a time. So I'm going to be doing this process 4 times for 4 minutes on each side. After the first 4 minutes, you flip them over and you let the other side cook for 4 minutes. Once they're done, you kind of shake them out a little bit. The little hole likes to collect some water, and you put them back on the baking sheet. You're going to preheat your oven for 450 degrees Fahrenheit. And for my oven, I let them bake 24 minutes. I know every oven is different, so you kind of just have to play with the time, but 24 minutes seems to work. So while the bagels are baking, I am going to be organizing this shelf here because this did hold books not that long ago, but since I've finished the library, it's now empty, and I think it would be the perfect place to put some yarn and some knitting things. I'm always a little bit nervous about putting yarn exposed on shelves because I always hear horror stories about moths, but I'm going to give it a try. And I think that if I dust it frequently and kind of move the yarn around frequently, it should be okay. So I'm putting just a small amount. Most of my yarn is still going to be upstairs in my dresser where I've been keeping it, but I'm going to trial using this for some yarn that I'm using in current projects and maybe just some sock yarn because I'm always knitting socks. So we'll see how it works out. Also on this bottom shelf, I'm going to be putting some knitting books. So like I showed you, I got this Harry Potter knitting book for Christmas. I also was gifted this Knitting for Olive book. I have a couple other pattern books. I have some crochet amigurumi books because they are adorable, and I used to make a lot of amigurumi, and I think I probably will again in the future, so I have some of those. I picked up some books thrifting. I'm always thrifting, so if I find something good, then I bring it home. Here's another amigurumi one. This magazine I love. I found it in Joann's. It's called Where Women Create. And I really love looking through. I have 2 of them. I love looking at different women's spaces where they do their creative work, and it's inspirational for me to create a beautiful space to do my work. So I guess that's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to create this little nook where I can hold all of my knitting things that I'm working on now. And then I recently subscribed to Lina magazine, and so this was the first issue that I received. So I'm going to put that in there too. I have my 52 weeks of sock book and my Knitovation Stitch Dictionary, Stitch Dictionary for color work. And then this was another thrifted knitting book that I found. We'll see how that works out. I also have these 3 books. This is A Stash of One's Own by Clara Parks. This is Free Range Knitter, which I don't have the cover on there, so that's not helpful. And then People Knitting, which I thought was fascinating. This is all like photographs of people knitting, and it's a century of photographs from World War II nurses producing socks for the war effort, abolitionist Sojourner Truth. They all found relaxation in the quintessentially compelling craft of knitting. So I thought that was a pretty sweet book. It's dusty. I need to dust it first.
The lights were dimmed as our eyes met, and you saw me, and forevermore I like to share that.
Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make sourdough bagels. If you didn't already know how to make them, I hope you get to make them soon. Let me know how they turn out. And I really had fun. So I hope you enjoyed this type of video. This is the Simple Living Week. Next week, I will be posting a video on the end of the month knitting wrap up, and I will also be posting on March 1st our book club video where we're going to talk about the book that we read during the month of February, which was Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. And I will be announcing our March book for our Pine Cottage book club. So if you're interested, I hope you'll join me. I am so happy that you joined me today, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll return again. Have a great sunny day. The sun is shining and it feels so good. Hope to see you in the next one.